Hello, it's Jamie J, live with Bottleneck, and we're getting ready to go live. Going live with John Johnson. So bear with us, and we'll be right back in 38 seconds. Well, hello, we are live. My name is Jamie J. I am the CEO and founder of Bottleneck. Distant Assistance, in case you didn't catch that. We had a name change recently. We're the world's first dedicated distant assistant company, but this is not why we're here today. Today, we are here to introduce you to the one and only Jack Johnson. John Johnson, sorry, Jack Johnson. I just saw Jack Johnson picture here. John Johnson, who's the CEO of Edgeworth Analytics. I guess you can tell who my favorite singer is. We're going to be talking about using data analytics to elevate the HR function. And this is going to be super cool because you know me, I deal a lot with HR. I absolutely love it. We consider ourselves a virtual HR company, so we love that. And why is John going to be able to help stop the bottleneck in your business? Well, Dr. John Johnson knows HR data like few others. As a PhD economist who analyzes the issues of liability and damages in labor and employment litigation, John understands how to transform companies' raw, messy data, which we all have, right, into meaningful analysis and reliable results that empower informed decision-making. A teacher at heart, John is known for his ability to explain technical concepts simply and clearly. I love that. John is also a business owner and entrepreneur who appreciates the power of harnessing data in running a high-performing organization. 10 years ago, he founded Edgeworth Economics and has since built the company into a world-class economic consulting firm. And in 2019, John launched Edgeworth Analytics to meet the growing demand for sound data analysis in human resources and other business services. John is the author of the book, Everydata, The Misinformation Hidden in the Little Data You Consume Every Day, and has delivered keynote speeches on Everydata to a range of business audiences. John received his PhD in economics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Okay, that's a pretty smart guy there, MIT. And his BA in economics with the highest distinction from the University of Rochester. So without any further ado, please allow me to welcome Dr. John Johnson. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for the fantastic intro. Wow, I hope I live up to the hype now. Wow.
Well, what I'm really excited about is talking to you more about this, and I'm excited how you're going to break that down so that it's easier for us to understand as a lay person. I am extremely challenged with data and math and all of those numbers and all of that stuff, and to be able to take all of that spaghetti factory and kind of unwind it so that we can easily digest it is something that I think is very hard to do. So I'm looking forward to that. Before we talk about that, though, I wonder if you can give us a little bit of background about who you are and what you're doing for those of us that haven't got to meet you before.
Yeah, well, as you said, I am a PhD economist. I had been a college professor back now about 20 more years ago. And I found that I was just going to be way too social to be a professor, and that I wanted to do practical issues. And so although I was kind of doing what you have to do, publishing, teaching, I decided to go into consulting. And so been in Washington, D.C. area ever since. I've worked for a few consulting firms. And then about now 11 years ago, I started my own consulting firm called Edgeworth Economics. The original consulting firm sort of focuses on litigation issues. So in that context, I do a lot of work where I testify as an expert witness in cases involving companies that have different disputes. And almost all of my testimony, for the most part, focuses on things with big data sets. In 2019, we started a sister company called Edgeworth Analytics, where we now take those same skills that we use in the courtroom and we bring them to companies more directly when they don't have litigation problems. So as opposed to being brought in when there's a big emergency, now we're advising companies as well, sort of more formally, to help them just make sense of their data. And so that's where we are today.
So perfect. Thank you for the lead up. So that's the consulting aspect of it. Is that more of kind of preventive maintenance, I guess you could say?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I mean, the reality is that people are afraid of their data. Data is multiplying at an enormous speed. It's just incredible how much data there actually is. And so companies really don't have the luxury of ignoring it anymore. They kind of have to, at a minimum, live with it, but ideally they actually make sense of it. The problem is, as you alluded to, most people are kind of either so overwhelmed because of the volume of data, or, just don't really love math, love statistics, and they think that's required to actually make sense of the data. And so what we really do is it's a combination of consulting, but also there's a very huge education component where what we're trying to do is help people learn how to think about data problems so we can empower them to do things themselves. And, not every data analysis has to be the most sophisticated, complicated thing to be useful. And so a part of it is also education, where we sort of teach classes and we sort of advise people, and basically even just sort of do consultations where I have a question. Can you help me just understand how to think about my data problem? Not necessarily, can you work on my billions and billions of data sets for me? We do some of that too, but that's kind of what we do.
So if you say, if someone realizes they have a data problem, first and foremost, kudos to them, because half the time I don't even realize I've got a problem with the data. And then the other time is, how do I know if I'm doing something right? Is this working? Like it's really hard to make informed decisions based on, gosh, you don't even know. Like, this is where maybe split testing comes in from a marketing perspective. Or, I mean, there's so many different sets. I'm wondering how maybe you can kind of say two things. If someone recognizes the data, kudos to them, then what? But if you don't even know where to look, how do we start?
Well, the one we always start with is we usually tell people the very first thing for any data analysis is first, let's remember you probably know your business better than anybody else. When I do a consulting assignment, I don't come in and pretend to know the business reality. I would want to talk to you about your business and what your challenges are. But the reason you want to do that is because you're trying to figure out what is the question you want to answer. So before you worry about what data sets you have or do you have the data sets, it's really about just what is the problem and what is the question I want to know the answer to. Once you have that framed out, then you can think about, well, is this a question I can answer with data? And if it is, well, what data do I have? Now, you're right, data doesn't come ready to use, but that discipline of sort of framing it around a problem and a practical issue is so important to actually be able to begin to make use or even identify what data sets you have. But most people don't sit and think about, well, I have this special data set here that'll answer this question or that data set there. So you really have to focus on the things that business people do. What's the problems that I'm confronting in my everyday business? What's the question I want to answer?
I love that you brought this up. We went through an exercise where we sent out surveys to all of our clients. And we asked them, what was the thing you liked best? What are your biggest challenges? Where do you see us missing the mark and all this stuff? What would make things easier? And we found some pretty incredible. I sent out an email to my list, and I said, I'm so embarrassed because I actually published some of the results that we got that were not very flattering for us. And I did that. Number one, I wanted to let people know, hey, this is what we did to address these issues, which we did. But it was amazing, the support that we got back from it. But what was more amazing, now we have avatars based on the feedback. And I'm not even sure if we did it right. To tell you the truth, John, I don't even know if it's working right. We just started, putting it out there. But I guess it's just over time, at least we have a baseline to start from, I guess. I don't know.
I think that's right. I mean, look, as I said, obviously I'm someone who's spent a lot of my life going to school, learn about data and numbers and statistics and sort of collecting data sets and studying data sets. But, not everyone has, and that doesn't mean that you can't use data in an effective way. So what's important from your story is you collected data, you have some meaningful insights that you believe you've gleaned that's consistent with how you think about your business, right? If you'd looked at your survey and you saw something that you thought was completely outside the realm of possibility, you'd probably wonder either about, well, what are these clients thinking or why? And you'd explore it further. So even that exercise, which is actually started as a qualitative data exercise, is data, right?
I didn't even know that, but okay.
Right? People that say things is data. But then now you've sort of started to convert it into both how can you get practical feedback how can you sort of start to address the problem? So that is a very pragmatic way to deal with the data. And it doesn't mean that you are running all sorts of sophisticated statistical analyses together. And again, I'm not insulting statistical analyses. I love to do statistical analyses. I'm just saying, as a more fundamental entry point to data analysis, a change in perspective that is about data as information, data as a portrait, as a snapshot, is a really critical mindset, I think, for business people and HR particularly, which is a field where many people go into HR because they love people. They love the people skills dealing with people. So you don't suddenly lose all those people skills because you're going to think about something in a data-oriented way. You continue to approach the problems practically.
So can you give us an example? Like this is a practical approach that we did there, but can you give us an example of where someone may not even know where they should start with this? And like, how would I even know to reach out to you and say, hey, I need help?
Right. Okay. So I think, one of the things that we try to do at our company is, we have a range of types of clients. We have sort of, and again, I don't like one thing we do is we just have sort of a consulting type service like called the data blueprint, where if you have a question and you want to just sort of talk to somebody for a few hours, or we just scope out with you, here's the nature of the problem you think you're facing. Here's the types of ways to identify data. Here's the types of things to think about, kind of like a do-it-yourself kind of approach where you have us as a guide, right? I think that's always a neat place to start because you don't need to hire my firm to do the work for you necessarily. Now, that doesn't mean some problems don't turn into an engagement that is much more significant. But I think the important starting point is creating a dialogue both internally around what the nature of the problems you're trying to solve and what the data sets you have access to are really, really critical. One of the most insightful experiences I know I had is, we teach some classes on analytics in-house and for HR managers in particular. And obviously COVID's changed that a bit because we can't go in-house. But before COVID had sort of launched, I remember it was really striking. We did one of these classes with a sort of major firm with their HR department. And we had probably, 15 HR leaders in the room from actually all over the country. And we got to the end of the class and, the biggest single feedback was the way we facilitated the people in the room talking to each other about the data sets each of them had, which was an unexpected side benefit. We were talking about how to think about shaping problems, how to think about the data analyses, but really what was most insightful was getting them talking to each other within a company about, oh, I have this retention problem. Well, I have this interesting data set you can rely on for that. Oh, well, what about this type of thing? Oh, the comp department has this kind of data. And it was really fascinating to watch that dynamic at play. So I think some of it I call is just creating a data dialogue, starting to talk about the issues. It doesn't mean you're going to get it perfect the first time. And again, I don't want to make you think that I'm underplaying the importance of rigor and testing, because I am a huge proponent of that. But again, there is a practical reality that it is still better to start to make decisions in a data-oriented way and to start to think about that discipline than to just sort of continue to go based on purely intuition or gut.
Intuition and gut will get you a long ways. It'll help start things up, but continuing making those decisions in the right way. Data is everything. I say data is worth more than money.
Well, because it just provides a framework and a rigor. It doesn't mean you always get to the right answer, but you know exactly how you got there. So if you have to modify it, you can go back and trace really carefully. Here were the assumptions. Here was the type of data. Here's why I made the decision I did. So I think of it as much as a tool to help with the decision making and trace your steps and then verify what you actually think you're accomplishing. As it's just sort of purely, sort of also data for the sake of here's the answer. Like everything in life and in business, it's about sort of getting to better answers, more certainty, more understanding and flagging of issues in advance. And I think that's a much better perspective as opposed to, let me talk to this data person to get the silver bullet answer to my problem. Perhaps it's more about, let me help you identify the nuance of your problem that can be seen more clearly when you have data to back it up.
I love that. So we're working with an MBA class out of a university, and we're actually doing some research on the potential of post-COVID, what that office environment looks like. Is it a hybrid model through artificial intelligence? There's a software company out there. They've figured out a way to analyze the data, because they did a study on a software company with 200 employees and found that the personal productivity levels jumped by 67%. Just the lines of codes they were writing were just crazy, killing it.
Wow.
However, the new releases and the new version updates of the software dropped dramatically, almost by over 50%. And I don't remember the exact percentage, but it was almost in half. And what they found is that the teams that were coming into the office and the collaboration efforts, they were having to work on fixing so many bugs than before. When they were working together on solving these issues, they were able to put a lot more software versions out, new releases out.
Sure.
So they found a way to study the data to make sure that they could bring the certain amount of people that needed to be collaborative in, and what days they should come into the office, right? There was 4 teams, red, blue, green, and yellow, or something like that. And they would come in and work together to keep, COVID down.
Sure.
But they also identified this little group of people can work remotely. And I thought it was so interesting because it was so heavy on the data end. It was data driven.
Yeah.
And that's all something that we're going through new now. We're just barely touching the surface on this thing. I don't think we have any idea what future workplace is going to be. I wonder what your take on that would be.
Yeah. So look, I think COVID has changed things in a way that all of us who are business owners and entrepreneurs and just about everyone can't even imagine. And so I mean, I know for my own business, as I said, as an entrepreneur with, about 80 employees, we've been fully remote across all of our offices because we work in teams. And so how did the team dynamic change? How are we trying to prepare our reports? We've also, as people that are interested in data and the workforce, we've actually had a number of COVID-oriented projects. And, we've been doing a fair amount. We have sort of one fairly large project with the NFL Players Association where we actually have a dashboard that we've built for them for their COVID resource center, where we update for every NFL city what the COVID cases are doing on a weekly basis so that they can sort of follow where all the teams are. And so these kinds of things, though, where can you take data that's available to help inform what a workplace is going to look like? Is it safe to reopen a workplace? What am I supposed to think about in terms of risk and reward, or reward sounds a little bit, in terms of productivity? These are all data-oriented questions. And so in the face, again, of sort of a series of unknowns in a crazy economic environment, we find we're being increasingly called upon to think through these issues with companies and clients and say, okay, well, here's what we can start to use the data for. Here's what we can't know. And that's another important part of it is, a good analyst knows the difference between what they can answer and where there's uncertainty. I can't tell someone about what their risk tolerance is, and I'm not going to make that value judgment for them. But I surely can sort of help to say, well, you have a workforce that is in certain areas, and these are particular hotspots. And so you need to be prepared for what that might or may not mean for your workforce. And so, again, I think you're right that there are so many opportunities as we rethink what is the workplace going to look like as we come out of this, and how long we may not, how long it may still be. And we've seen that reflected in the data analyses that we're being asked to do as well.
I think it's fantastic. What I'm getting from this is start a conversation, and through that conversation, based on where you had all the 15 HR execs talking back and forth,
right?
It's almost like, wow, ideas are popping up that you wouldn't have thought about perhaps in the beginning of that conversation, but at the end of that conversation, maybe the problem is isn't what you originally thought it was. Now it might be something else, and then turn to you for maybe getting some more data to back that up and find out whether or not that's right or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think of my skill set as sort of I sometimes think of it as a data facilitator, right? What my job really is yes, I can answer questions for you, but you got to kind of help me get to what the questions are that are worth answering, right? Nobody likes the consultant that comes in and says, well, I know your business and I know everything about this, and I'm going to just tell you what to do. And nobody likes that. It's got to be, and I don't find that useful as a business owner myself. I don't want to hear that. What I want is to know that I have a problem that I need solved. And I'm trying as a business owner to put my expertise in perspective in terms of, all right, what do I know about my business? What do I know? Why is this a problem for my bottom line, or for my employees, or for my retention, or for whatever the issue is, or for my culture? And what I'm trying to do then is say, okay, can I provide a framework, a rigor, or help you identify some places to look that might get you to answers you never even thought about? And that's the most effective way to use your data. Can you get to that aha moment in the data? And that's my favorite part of my job, is when I see the data and I'm like, oh, there's an answer I never thought about. There's really what looks like the key. That's what it's about. So I think of it as facilitating understanding your data better to get to the real world problem.
Well, I have a question. I get asked this question a lot, especially with what I do for a living is how can I provide a good company culture even through a distributed workforce?
Mm-hmm.
Have you been asked that question ever?
Yeah, a few times.
Like, I
So,
imagine your first reply would be another question, but
well,
how do you deal with
right.
that?
Look, I think culture is critical. I think culture is really organization specific.
A good culture.
Good culture, right? Well, unfortunately, a bad culture can be too, right? I mean, I know for myself. Again, now I'm entrepreneurial. I started my first firm because I wanted to be disruptive in my industry. It wouldn't surprise you that I don't look like a lot of the other testifying experts in the world because I don't have gray hair and leather patches on my arms. I'm not a college professor, kind of more the whiz kid type. And what I wanted to do was build an initial company that created opportunity. There was an incubator for experts that were sort of working their way up their career and really focused on service. And so it's weird because what does it mean to be in a service industry if you're a testifying expert? Well, I provide objective testimony, but I make sure that I'm responsive to answering the questions that my clients need answered. Now, it's the same thing that we do with our analytics company, responsive to the questions we need to answer. So the way I think about culture is we have to start with what the business proposition is. If my business is oriented around providing high quality data analysis, where we're incredibly responsive to our customers' needs, where we answer questions the client needs answered, and we teach them what the answers are, right? Now, all of my cultural pieces have to come around centrally building off of that particular set of business goals. Now, as a culture, I wanted a culture to be something I always say, I always want to be proud. My name is on the door. There's a way we're going to treat our employees. We're going to be generous. We're going to be a meritocracy. Those are elements that come from the value system that I bring to the business as our leader, and then have my management team on. And so that's a second part of it, but it still has to be oriented around that business reality. Here's what we're trying to do for the business. And here's how having these values will make us serve our clients better and be great to our employees as a result. Because if we're customer service oriented, that means our employees are going to get opportunities to do interesting work, to learn how to focus, to learn how to grow so they can serve our clients better so we can get more clients. So I wanted it to be that an Edgeworth economist or an Edgeworth analyst meant something. They meant that you're going to get your question answered. It means that you're going to have somebody who's going to think hard about your problem. And so the culture then becomes part of the DNA of the firm. And that's the way I've approached it. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy. And as a leader, you have to be the guardian of the culture. And we've made mistakes and things have at times veered a little bit off in ways that I've had to go back and course correct. And I think that's sort of part of your job as the.
But you got to learn. Like I can only imagine what you learned from that.
Yeah, you do. You're constantly learning. And, it is really important to try to constantly think about that. And I think that's a really good way for your management to sort of approach these problems. Now, does data play into that? Well, that's an interesting question. We do think about sort of surveys of our employees. We do try to collect information. We think about productivity. We think about times where there have been problems. But not everything is quantifiable. No. Are you a good colleague is not always quantifiable. But that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that we can't sort of continue to try to set standards in a rigorous way so people know the expectations. And I think that's another real key to the culture. Whatever the culture is, if you continue to set clear expectations for people, it's a lot easier for them to meet it than if there's some vagaries or sometimes unintended consequences of decisions. So the rigor that I bring to the data analytics part of my practical consulting work, I at least try to bring that rigorous thinking to the cultural HR pieces beyond those that are data problems the same way. What am I trying to accomplish for the business? How do I want to treat the employees? How do we want people to act here to make this the best place we can be?
And I learned this from a friend of mine, Gabe Arnold, but I'm a big fan of culture, good culture. There can be toxic culture as well. I really am, but we're very system and process driven here. We're really into workflows. So we'll do a video. This is how you do it. First of all, we're all remote, so a lot of it's on the computer, but our team knows when they build a workflow, every time a mouse button is clicked, that's a step so that we get uber detailed. And it does wonders because we can check in with them to make sure that they've got this down and they understood it and everything like that. Plus, they feel power out of this because they've built something.
Right.
They've created something, and then we're able to communicate back and forth. Every single person on the team has the power to make their own decisions.
Right.
And we do that because, number one, is it good for the company? Number two, is it good for the staff? And number three, is it good then for the client? Because everybody knows if the company's not healthy, not doing financially well, how in the world are we going to pay for our staff, or how are we going to take care of them? How are we going to give them the right information or software or whatever to perform their jobs correctly? And if we're not doing that, they're not going to be happy. And how in the world could I expect them to take care of our clients?
Right.
So that's a pretty powerful thing that I've seen there, but I don't have any data to back up whether or not it's really helped us out. I know we have a really good retention rate.
Well, if you have a good retention rate, you have some data. But so the question is, could you collect something more systematic, either about a time when you put those workflows in place, or differences in projects where you thought you had more or less workflows, where you could actually see what that kind of productivity did? The key to that kind of thing, I call those natural experiments, right? At some point in time, you implemented these procedures, or you've implemented them differently in different locations with different people or different project managers, and you could gather data on sort of outcomes. To see, as that's happened, with sort of more, different gradations of that, is there some evidence that certain things are working better or not? So there could be ways to quantify that. But you also said, you do have good retention, you do have happy clients. Those are important outcomes too, right? At the end of the day, not to be too blunt, but if you are serving your clients well and they're continuing to come back to you, that's a really important piece of data for you.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's that you've done the best you always can, but it actually is a pretty helpful. I mean, I do think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that running a successful business is hard. And so sometimes just having a successful business that is continuing to serve our clients well in a way that we think is, I think I put a high premium on ethics and honesty and truthful sort of in the approaches that we take. But if you've got that kind of baseline, that's a pretty important part of things. And that doesn't mean that every company with financial success has, good outcomes. But I do think a lot of small businesses, when you're trying to figure out how to make sense of your data, continue to link it to the practical business outcomes matters a lot.
Yeah.
And that might be the thing you have time to do. I mean, again, I've obviously been running my company out for 11, 12 years. When we started, my business partner was the IT director and the HR director and the
many hats
person. Right, exactly. And so now we're a much bigger company and we have a much bigger management team, but it's still, you kind of never lose that entrepreneurial approach to the business to always try to make it better. I think it's just something
that's what makes you the leader. That's a good leader. Yeah.
You see that in people that have small businesses or medium-sized businesses or grow businesses. There's sort of a certain part of it, which is about a mentality and how you tackle problems and really focus on them to kind of get to the good outcomes.
One of the things we were talking about today, and I'm saying this, I'm hoping that some of my experience resonate with some of the people that would listen and hear this, because it might happen. This might be happening in their business.
Yeah.
We talked about it this morning. We lost a business to another company, very similar industry, and we don't believe we have competitors. We believe that there's people that have a similar business that run it a little bit differently. So we're not better, not worse, but we're different. And we lost that business. And I tried as hard as I could to reach out to this person and say, you know what, I don't want to be pushy or anything. I really want to know what it was that, that made you choose the way you chose, because I want to always be improving my business. And I tried to do it as much from like, I care, I really care. And that this particular person, it didn't have time to talk with me and, didn't want to give me any feedback, but I so wanted to get that data, like that information, so we could figure out how to do that. And sometimes we're challenged with that. I'm wondering, have you ever had any of your clients voice anything like this? And is there anything that you might be able to say for other people that may have lost business to, a competitor or whatever? Are there some cool ways of going about it and saying, hey man, what did we do wrong?
Yeah. So I think every company deals with this reality. I mean, our litigation business is a little different, because generally what happens is you get retained to sort of testify as an expert in an engagement. And the way you've lost business is that lawyer never calls you back again if they're unhappy with your work. Right?
Yeah.
But still, we're always thinking about, where is our portfolio of clients? Where are they coming from? Are we getting good feedback? And I think part of it is just continuing to put in, one part is sort of getting ahead of a problem. Like if you're concerned about losing clients, or you find that you've lost a major client, or a client surprises you that you've lost them, you can put in place some things to collect information along the way to make sure that, you're kind of on top of, do you have indicators that might be going on, or why that happened? Now, again, sometimes after a client's gone, it is actually a little too late. They often don't want to talk to you. They've made a decision, whatever, or even if it's not, maybe they're just embarrassed to say, I just made this choice, the other competitor was cheaper. Whatever. It's not always personal. Like, it's not always like, oh, you failed miserably. It's a combination of a value proposition or whatever they're sort of trying to decide. But I think the notion of being very well aware of your client base and thinking hard about, do you have concrete points in time where something changed with an engagement that might at least tip you off as to what the data is telling you? I think that could be a way to sort of put it back together at the end. But I do generally, I think on those kind of problems, you want to try to get ahead of it in the sense that if you can continue to get feedback like you did from your survey, for example, that will probably be a more effective way than ex post trying to diagnose a loss, unless you're finding you're losing a lot of clients and there's some common theme you're trying to say, what's going on? But I think that's a little different than what you're talking about, which is you had a client, you lost a client. You would have liked to know more why they made the choice they did. A little hard after the fact to find data to help you fill that in.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's just I've seen it happen to a lot of people, and they're wondering, man, what did I do wrong? And for me, it's what did we do? Like, because we're so processed. Like, why? But we did everything we did. Maybe it's wrong. I don't think it's wrong. I think it's good. But there's a point in time where it's too much analyzing, and you need to just
right. There is an element of I have also. This might sound weird, but I've also fired clients from the other perspective, where I've said, this, given what you want and given what you're asking us to do, we're not the right firm to do that for you. And that's a hard thing too, but it's not always, when you get to the reality as a business owner that you understand that sometimes it's not about you at all. Sometimes it is, and you better be ready to act quickly if it is about you. And, those are the kinds of things I think. And sometimes it's for the best. And I don't mean that. I value all of my clients, but there are times where we have had either someone asking us to do something that we couldn't do, asking us to do something or say something we wouldn't say, or, not setting us up for success. Those are indications, that's probably not the right client relationship. And so, again, I understand times are tough and we're all kind of trying to, be aggressive about business.
Figure things out. Yeah.
But at the same time, there is a practical reality, and it's a hard lesson for many business owners that there's sometimes the client is just not right for you and what your organization can offer at that point in time.
I read this on a post the other day on Facebook in a group, and this lady, she wrote on there, she said, rejection is protection. And I thought, that's pretty dang cool. What a positive way to look at things,
a positive somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. So where is someone at on their journey where they would say, hey, it's time for me to reach out to Dr. John Johnson?
Well, so I would say there's a few places. So obviously one is if you have some, we have a lot of different types of engagements. One place is just simply, we do like to advise companies with sort of just small businesses with small engagements, which is nothing more than, a few hours of time where we ask you some questions about your data problem, a specific problem you have. We go away, we think about it, we come back, we talk to you about it a little bit and say, okay, here's some things, here's some of our ideas. Here's some things to think about. Here's the types of data sets to look at. That's a pretty contained thing. So we sort of like to do that, but that's also a way for people.
And it's more on the HR side. Is that correct?
Right, absolutely. We do a range of problems, but absolutely on HR, that's an obvious place. And we do things for retail. We do things on other, one of the neat things about being a data guy is, played with hundreds, thousands of data sets at this point in my career. So we know a lot about HR and labor economics, but we also know a lot about pricing and demand and a whole bunch of other types of issues as well. Then there's sort of a different type of engagement where, someone has a really significant data problem where they want to invest in a partner to say, hey, can you come in and help me solve this problem? What can you do to model an answer, or what can you do to help create something for me where either I'll get kind of repeated answers or, regular reporting that would help me. And again, I don't think of myself as a dashboard company where we're going to come build, we build dashboards, but I actually think we're more about the insights to answer the question the right way. But then there's sort of, and those engagements,
and then getting to the right question, I would
exactly. And those engagements can be all over. We worked recently with a retail store where we helped them, where they were carrying a very, very large inventory, and they wanted to know what they should keep or should they carry this inventory. We were able to help them with some modeling where we showed, look, here are your highest profitable products, and here are the ones that are never selling that you're just keeping on your floor for no reason at all. And this became really important with COVID, where they had this huge inventory, and now they don't have the same kind of traffic they had before. And so the problems can be very varied. But there are more traditional engagements where we are going to come work with somebody, get data, answer a question, build a model, build a output, or do an analysis to answer your question. So there's a range, but it definitely scopes from, hey, I just need some data advice, to I need to put some serious brain power behind this problem I have. Can you and your team help me with this and be my ally to find the answer?
I love that. I think it's fantastic. The confidence gained by these people must be amazing once they figure out, hey, I am making the right decision here. The data supports this.
Well, I definitely think the idea that you can make decisions knowing you have really pushed as hard as you can with the information you had gives you both a great deal of confidence, and also things don't always go the way you expect, but at least now you know exactly what the basis of the decision was. And that just means you're not going to have the same kind of regrets. And if you do have to pivot, you know what you're looking at and why. And I just think that creates a much better outcome for everybody.
Well, I think it's great. And I can't even think of I think it was called Moneymaker or something like that. What was the movie with Brad Pitt?
Moneyball.
Moneyball. There you go. Yeah. He was like, oh no, they were like, what are you doing? He's like, the data supports it. Data supports it. It made things so much easier.
There are times where the data actually supports the simple intuition too. It's not always that it gives you the surprising answer. Sometimes it just gives you confidence that the answer you have is actually the right way to approach the problem too.
Oh, well, I love it. Well, what's the best way for people to reach out to you and get in touch with you?
You can go to if you go to our website, edgeworthanalytics.com, all our email addresses are there. You can reach out to me directly. You can, my phone number's on there as well. You can call anytime. We'd love to sort of talk to people, and we're very responsive. And but you can see all about our dashboards, all of our papers we're writing on COVID, some of our client case studies, edgeworthanalytics.com.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap today?
No, well, thanks for the opportunity. A great conversation. I love to talk about data and sort of talk about data fits into business. And, I hope all your listeners and viewers here that have you stay safe and healthy, and that we all can continually weather the storm together. So it's a tough time, but if there's any way we can help, please reach out.
Yeah, we are a formidable force, us humans here. And so we'll find a way around this. Well, can you hold on one quick second? I'll go ahead and wrap.
Sure.
Okay, 1 second, John. I'll be right there. Well, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone that tuned in. If you have questions later and you'd like for me to forward those to Jack or to John Johnson, I'm sorry, I will definitely do that. You have to keep in mind that this is going to be on replay. So you might be watching it. It looks like it's live. It may be a replay. Go ahead and post your questions down there in the comment section. I'll forward anything off. Again, I was talking with John Johnson. He's the CEO of Edgeworth Analytics. And we talked about using data analytics to elevate the HR function. And here's his bio once again. If you'd like to learn how to stop the bottleneck in your business, highly recommend reaching out to John. Thank you again so much for your time today. And I'll leave you with one more thing. Make your own ripple.